I don't know what I did there. Good morning, everyone. Let me come to this side first. Hello? Are you awake? Who just came in with a bus? I saw a bus stop outside 10 minutes ago or so. Anyone? All right, let me come to this side. Good morning, everyone. How many of you have been here yesterday? Okay. Who only arrived today? All right. I want to congratulate you for being here. It costs money and it takes time to attend these conferences. A lot of people are lazy and they Netflix all day long and they're not upskilling themselves. And I think you all know how the world of software quality and testing is changing. It's changing from under our feet. And if we don't constantly read and do LinkedIn Learning or Udemy or attend conferences like this or network with each other, the world is going to go past us. All right, so my talk today is about business. Okay, these conferences are normally about a lot of technical things, which is good and it's very important. I don't know how many of you were in the previous session with Paul Gerard. I thought it was a very good talk. For me, one of the things I got out of it is that, you know, we can certainly build on the foundation of the likes of certification and TMMI and CMMI. I'll touch on that later. But we have to learn to think for ourselves. We have to learn to solve business problems and not just work in our little silos and do what we are told. And especially those of you who are leaders. How many of you lead teams? Okay. Our role is changing even more. It's an important role because our teams are going through tremendous change. And change brings insecurity, change brings fear, change sometimes brings out the ugly part of human beings. I'm sure you've all seen that. So how do we become servant leaders? I don't know if you've ever heard that term. So we're no longer in what they call command and control. The problem is a lot of us, when we were growing up in our careers, we had leaders who did not give us a good example. And it's so easy to be that kind of leader yourself because it's all you know. I once had a job where look, in a lot of my jobs I didn't like my boss, but I had one job where I really hated him a lot. I had these fantasies about waiting for him in the car park after work finished and just beat him with a baseball bat. I luckily did not do that. But he treated his staff so ill. He was such a narcissist. He would be shouting and screaming. He would kick his briefcase. And people were afraid of him. And years later, I actually realized I have to thank the universe for giving me that experience. Because unless I had an experience of such a bad leader, maybe I can't even call him a leader, just call him a manager, I would not have known how bad it was for people in the team to experience that. And I promised myself, even though I am a very imperfect person, and I make mistakes, and I sometimes lose my temper like we all do, I will never be the kind of leader that that person was to me. And it helped me through my career. You know, Petra gave a great talk yesterday about the different colors of personalities. I don't know how many of you were in that talk. I really would like to recommend you to look at the video and the slides in the next few weeks when it's on the website. I learned a lot from that talk because we are all different kind of people. And we work with other people who are very different than us. And often we have the same motive. We want to win. We want to have a successful project. But we miss each other in translation so much that we actually think we are working against each other. Any of you who are in a long-term relationship or married will also know that's very true. It's so easy to fight about the smallest little thing, but because it's a misunderstanding. Remember, everything I say to you comes through a filter. That filter is based on past experience, past hurt, insecurities, fears of the future. But not only that, what I say that comes through my filter, you hear through your own filter. And that's why I always believe in my team, but also in a relationship, is to be very honest very quickly. So my view is just the moment somebody says something and I think they meant it ill, is to stop them immediately and say, listen, hang on, I'm sure you didn't mean this, but let me tell you what I heard. And then right there and then you sort it out. Because otherwise what will happen? You go thinking about it, you lie awake at 3 o'clock in the morning and you think, she meant that, he meant that, and they must hate me, and all those kind of things. In any case, so let me get back to my topic. I am from South Africa. I traveled a very, very long time to get here. It was door to door. Since leaving my house to walking into the hotel was 23 hours. So yesterday I spent most of the day recovering. It's my second time in Russia. I was at SQA Days in Moscow last year. I went from 36 degrees Celsius in Johannesburg in November to -6 in Moscow, which they say is still not very cold there. You will know. But it was a big change, but I loved it. But this is a beautiful city as well. How many of you are from outside of Russia, other countries? Quite a few. How many of you travel more than 6 hours to get here? Okay, where are you from? Where's that? Okay. Who travels more than 12 hours to get here? More than 12 hours. Anyone? Also? So you come by donkey cart? No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. All right, so again, I want to congratulate you for being here. Now, today's talk is an hour and a half. I normally do a half-day workshop on this topic, so even though it feels like, phew, it's a long time, I'm going to have to rush through a few things. You will most likely hear topics or ideas today that you have not heard before. Or these might be things that you say, I've heard about it, I think I know what it is. But I really want to encourage you, and these slides are available on the website, take some of the concepts that I'm talking about, like supply and demand and capacity management and vendor contracts and those kind of things, and educate yourself. Because these are things that you will be exposed to in your career more and more. Okay, so let me get going. So what I'll do is I'll speak for 40 minutes, we'll have a 10-minute break, and then 40 more minutes. I made a mistake in Riga. I was in Riga in March, where halfway through the talk I said to people, do you want to take a break? And people said no. I said, okay, well, let's keep on going. The problem is, and it's also the last session of the day, so people are tired. About 20 minutes before the end of my talk, I could see in people's eyes, the lights are on, but no one is home. Because we all struggle. We all have short attention spans, and you know why? Because of our mobile devices. You know, they say you look at your phone 1,400 times a day, the average person. Okay, so short attention spans. So now you're sitting here for 40 minutes or an hour and a half, so just stick with me. Don't be afraid or concerned about topics you might hear that you don't know about. We are here to learn. So just a little bit about myself. I worked in a sales and a business development role for about 20 years now. 10 of that, well 12 now, was in software testing, software quality assurance. I worked for the likes of SQS, for Accenture, but in roles where I worked for a vendor or a provider and we were seeing clients and trying to fix their problems. I sold some big deals, especially big automation deals, onshore, offshore, but over the years, I only had experience of the vendor side. How many of you work for a vendor, a provider of services? Some of you? So I assume the rest of you work for those who consume the services, banks and telcos and others. So you might have vendors or vendor contractors in your space. My biggest client for about 8 years was a bank. Big old traditional bank, about 100 years old. Like a lot of these banks go, very federated, a lot of legacy stuff, thousands and thousands of people. And this big client of mine asked me to come and work for them as a staff member. So I grabbed the opportunity because I never worked on that side of the fence, so to speak. So I became a staff member, and one of my responsibilities was to deal with the vendors. In that bank, we had 17 testing vendors. That's already a problem, too many vendors. But these companies are companies I've been competing with for many years to get business. Now I'm their client. And it's so interesting because now I'm in meetings where they come and pitch business to me. And I tell you, I was surprised at the poor quality of relationships a lot of these vendors have, because they almost come into the meeting just to sell you something and then they go. It doesn't always feel like they're really interested in your problem. The challenge of what we do is we sell services, not products. If you sell a product, it's a little easier. You might be working for Hewlett-Packard, I might be working for Dell, and we're both trying to sell our servers to a client, and it's about spec and pricing, and maybe a little bit of support afterwards. When you sell the likes of quality assurance services, you are essentially selling trust. Because I need to be able to trust you, and that you and your team will be able to deliver, because if you don't, my career will be in jeopardy. And that's what I learned in that role from the other side, a different view. to see how all these vendors, you know how they start their presentations, and you might have seen it or you might have done it yourself. Your first slide is a map of the world, and you say we are on 128 countries, we have 400,000 people, we're a $40 billion company. And I sit on the other side of the table looking at that slide, and you know what's the only question that comes up in my mind? So what? So what? And everyone does that. And I'll never do that again. I used to do that before I went into that role. Because you think your client will be so super impressed by what a great company you are. Sometimes it's the very small companies that give you a lot better service than the big ones. The big ones have nothing to lose, because you might be, compared to their global revenue, your country might be 1%. Let alone you as a company, you might be 0.0001% of their annual revenue. But if it's a smaller company, you might be 30% of their revenue. So the amount of attention, the amount of relationship building, the amount of making sure we work together to fix the problem will be a lot more and in depth than some of these bigger companies. 4 months ago, I went back to consulting. So I was at the bank only for 2.5 years. Now I'm working for a company called IQ Business in Johannesburg, about 800 people. So it's not a massive consulting firm, but it's also not super small. But now for the first time, after working for the bank, I'm seeing clients again. And I tell you, the way I'm approaching it is a lot different. There's a lot more business talk in what I'm doing with clients, which is what I'm talking about today, than technical talk. Because sometimes we're so busy with technical stuff that we forget why we do what we do. What is the goal of software testing? Anyone? Providing information about products and services? So the stakeholders could take the right decisions. That's good. The stakeholders can take the right decisions. Anyone on this side, why do we test software? User experience. Information. These are good answers. And they're right. Normally I get a lot of very technical answers. And why I'm asking this question normally is to illustrate a point. Testing or quality assurance is a means to an end. We do it for a specific reason. We don't do it for just doing it. And sometimes when we speak to our clients or our stakeholders, we speak about testing as if it's a thing on its own, but it's there to achieve a goal. I think all the answers were right, but the one that was the most right for me is user experience. We don't test primarily for functionality. We test for user experience. The sad thing is, a lot of us are in organizations where, as a testing team, you are still very isolated. They might call it DevOps, they might call it Agile, but you are still working in your little bubble. And a lot of our peers, the architects and the developers, still look at testers as what I call second-hand citizens. In the past, 10 or 20 years ago, there was a perception, to a large extent rightly so, that you became a tester because you were not smart enough to do anything else. You failed, you can't do development, you can't be an architect, so let's just test. Because testing is easy, it's just a tool and we click and it's doing things. That's what a lot of people think, and a lot of people still think that. Not us, but some of our peers, and that's our problem. But in the world where we're moving now, and where we've already moved, let alone cognition, artificial intelligence, machine learning, which is here already, the role of quality, not just testing, but quality, is massively important. And I'll get to some of that now. This is a tester. Do you recognize him? Do you recognize yourself in the mirror? We are enthusiastic people. Some of our peers don't think that. But I don't know about you, I love it. I love reading and training and new technologies and conferences and networking. So I think to some extent that's me, even though I'm quite an introvert. But when I get to some meetings and we start talking about stuff that I like, that's me. And you know what I've seen many, many times in my career? We're in a meeting with our clients, we're in a meeting with business, and that's us. How many of you know what business looks like when we meet with them? You know Homer from Simpsons? Oh! Because we miss each other. Let me tell you why. This is what we talk about. Frameworks, continuous delivery, pipelines, automation, important things. But from a business point of view, who cares? Because all that stuff is a means to an end. And you know, in the past, business, your client, was not as smart as we are. But they're becoming smarter every day. in the past with clients, and I'm talking about quite a few years ago, you can almost tell them anything about testing and frameworks and automation, they would believe you. These days, a lot of them are smarter than we are. Because they come to conferences, they read books, and things like that. So you have to really know what you're talking about when you speak to, whether it's your client, if you're a vendor, or whether it's your client in a project like business. So we speak about all this stuff. What does business want to speak about? Managing my risk, speed to market, customer experience. Compliance is a big issue in banks still. Compliance is one of the reasons we can't move as fast as we want to move. It's one of the reasons we can't just DevOps and Spotify and Agile everything, because of compliance. And IP retention. Yes, you're bringing in a vendor from India or somewhere else, but what happens when they leave? And I could put a lot more on this slide. But can you see why we're missing each other? Now, we are in a world where, as I said, where business is becoming a lot more technical. The problem is with technical people is they're not becoming equally smarter when it comes to business and how business works. That is the purpose of my talk today. This talk is really just introductory. And as I said, all I want to do is give you a few concepts that hopefully you will go read up a bit more and not only grow in your technical skills but also in your business skills. I've partially answered that question already. You know, when I develop a slide deck, I always start with the very last slide or very last 2 or 3 slides. Because you are not going to remember facts. That's a mistake we make sometimes when we prepare our slides. We put a lot of stuff on there. People don't remember that. You will walk out of this thing today with 1 or 2 perceptions. 1 or 2, either that guy is really shit, I don't want to go to his talk again, hopefully that's not the case, but you're entitled to your opinion. Or you might say, sure, I really have to, and this is what I hope you get, I really have to upskill myself, not just technically, but from a commercial point of view. They call it commercial acumen. How I speak to business, how I speak to my client, what they mean when they speak about compliance and risk and driving down costs and stuff like that. Okay. So just quickly, I'm going to start just touching on business and tech again. Then I'm going to introduce you to a fictional little character called Annie. Then I'm going to talk about business management principles, building your team, leading your team, and then just there's a book I'd like to recommend. And hopefully this will take us through an hour and a half. But there's so much under each of these topics that I will literally just skim the surface. Okay, in the past, business and technology were quite separate. In fact, what I should have done here, tech should have been quite a small circle. Because you work for a bank, the bank is big, there's 50,000 people. And then there's this division called technology. It's maybe 500 people or 1,000 people. And what's happened over time? We started working together better in the likes of Agile and DevOps. But we're still quite separate. And business tends to blame everything that goes wrong on IT. Have you experienced that? I went to the bank I worked for, I went to a branch to get currency for my trip to Moscow. And the lady could see on the system I'm a staff member, because as a staff member you get preferential rates and interest rates and discounts. And she said, so where do you work? I said, I work in technology. And she started complaining about how slow the system is. And sometimes they can't help clients because everything is hanging. And she sees me as technology, so it's my fault. Have you seen this maybe with your family, maybe your father or your mother or a brother or sister? Because you are computer people. You know, my computer's not working, please come and fix it. Have you had that before? I say, you just think I know everything, and it's so easy to fix it. Okay. So we're working a lot closer with business. How many of you work in some sort of agile team, some sort of a DevOps squad at the moment? Okay. It's different than what we were used to a few years ago. For a lot of us, that's still not the case. But suddenly you are working with people who are not just testers, you're not just waiting at the end of the project when there's no time or money left to suddenly fix stuff that you can't fix because it should have been fixed in architecture or the requirements are incomplete or things like that. We are now working with business and architecture and development. It's a different audience, and we need to speak a different language to be able to work with them. And we have a big job to change the perception they have about testing. I've worked in squads where they looked at me or my team and they said, we actually don't know why you are here. We don't need you. We test everything in development already. And then it's about changing that perception. Coming in with a quality conversation, end-to-end quality and customer experience, not just testing and tools and frameworks. What is already happening, and in the next few years this will happen to every organization where you work in, is this. You will most likely not be able to distinguish between business and technology. And why is that? The other day I asked this question. I did a talk on artificial intelligence as it applies to human resources, recruitment, onboarding of staff, managing staff, and so forth. And I asked them, I said, how many of you work for a bank? And they all put up their hands, saying, yeah, okay. How many of you work for a bank? Okay. So how many of you work for a software development company with a banking license? Everyone should put up their hands again. Think of this, and this is a mindset change. Every organization is a software organization, primarily. A bank is a software-driven organization. Now, we know there are branches, bricks and mortar branches. We know sometimes you have to walk into a branch and give your card and do things. But everything is happening on our mobile phones. In fact, if you go to your bank branch, if you have a reason to go to your bank branch, it means something went wrong. Because theoretically, you should be able to do everything through digital channels. All right. So you might be working in an organization where you are a little bit closer to business, but soon we will all, as part of multifunctional squads, be in a picture like this, where business and technology is essentially merged. So it brings back to my point, the way we approach our business understanding, how business works as part of testing, it needs to change, and we need to mature ourselves in that. Okay, here's a question for you. Globally, what percentage of total IT budgets are spent on managing quality and testing? Give me 2 or 3 guesses. Anyone? What, 15? 50. Okay. Who says it's about 10 or 12%? Okay. 30%, 30? 80%? 20%? It sounds like we had I'm busy selling something. Give me 5, give me 5, give me 3, give me 3. I don't know how many of you know this publication, the World Quality Report. If you don't, it's worth reading it. It comes out every year. It's produced by Sogeti and Capgemini. And they are normally quite good with the trends that they predict for the future. So it's freely available. You register and you get the email, but go look at it. It's also similar to Gartner reports and some of the others, and I want to encourage you. Get your hands on these things so that you know what's happening, not just in your country or not just in your company, what's happening in the world outside there in QA and testing and in technology. So here's the answer. 26% currently of global IT budgets are spent on managing quality. That figure was 33% a year ago. So it is coming down, and they reckon it might spike to 42% in the next few years. And why is that? Again, back to the bank conversation. In the past, if the ATMs, the automatic teller machines, were down, I would hate that as a client, but it's okay, I can still do other things. Or if their call center was down. But now, all these channels are converging onto a handset in my pocket. So when something is down or not working, I experience it right here, and it's impacting everything. It's impacting my experience. And as a generation, we are not as brand loyal as our parents and their parents were. So it's easier to move from one bank to another. In fact, banks make it very easy. I moved to a bank a few years ago. I didn't fill in one document. I filled in some detail on the website screen. And they literally moved all my debit orders like that. It was easy. Within a day, in fact, it took a few minutes most likely, I moved all my banking from one bank to the other. So don't think because it's like my father, he's been with a bank for 55, 60 years. He will never move, and that's okay. Also, I don't think he ever does any banking on his cell phone. He still likes to go to the branch. He wants to meet somebody and talk to them. The younger generation is not like that. So we need to manage quality. Think of security leaks. Think of data protection, which is legislated, GDPR and the rest. Think of Facebook's reputation with the whole Cambridge Analytica thing. I'm definitely more careful what I do on Facebook. I don't know about you after that. And again, not just testing, managing quality, end-to-end quality, which is what we are doing. 26%. So a lot of money is being spent. Think of how many billions of dollars or euros that is. Think if you are working for a bank, you might know what their annual IT budget is. Take about a third of that, and that's what they're spending. Now, they can be spending so much money because it's inefficient and it's not working and there's a lot of duplication and they have the wrong skills and they don't have the right tools. That's a reason why we are potentially spending a lot of money. So as part of this business conversation is and I'll get to that, how do we look at our team from an upskilling point of view, from a lean principles point of view, from avoiding rework, from a reusing test artifacts. We need to work smarter with the money that we have. We live in a brand new world. I've already touched on this, and I want to encourage you. Technical skills. You have to increase your technical skills. I don't know if I should ask this publicly. Let's see if you're brave. How many of you are manual testers? Okay. A lot of people, about 2/3 of testers globally are still doing manual testers. Now, there can be two reasons for it. It can be that your skills are not developed enough and you should get off your bum and start learning. Or it could also be that you're working in a project or a company where no matter how skilled you are and how technical you are, the way they're working is through manual processes. There's a lot of manual testing, and I'm not saying it's the end of the world and you're going to lose your job and doomsday thing like that. But we can no longer afford to do anything manually and repetitively and slowly anymore. We have to automate. So on the one hand, I want to encourage you, find ways of increasing your technical skills. But what my talk's about today is this, the second part of it, is you have to increase your business skills. Remember that picture of the two circles? Business and technology converging. Now, what I want to do in the rest of the talk, I've got about 10, 12 minutes left for the break. And then I want to get into the detail. But let's see how far we go. Look at this picture. It's essentially, it shows career progression. And this is just, it's a generalization. It's maybe not exactly true for everyone. And this can be true for developers or BAs or even somebody who is a plumber or something like that. We normally start off in a solely technical role. We don't really have management responsibilities. And as we grow in our career, our management responsibilities become more. Or our technical responsibilities. So there's two ways. You grow in your career and then you need to get to a split, where you either become a technical specialist or you grow in management. And both are equally relevant. I have a friend in the United States. He's very good at what he does, and he was promoted all the way through the ranks. And then he said to me one day, he said, all I'm doing is just managing people, and managing people's nonsense, and incentivizing people, and looking at salary structures, and firing people. And so I'm not actually doing any more development. And he asked to get his salary reduced and to be demoted, to get back to the stuff that he loves doing. Now, some of you might have experienced this in your career already. Because if you get to this place, you don't do anything technology or testing anymore. All you do is you're managing people, and you're managing people's stuff, and you're managing politics in your organization. So my question for you is, where are you on this scale? Some of you, and this is not about seniority, because you could be in testing for 10 or 15 years, and you could still be here. And it could be the result of where you work, or it could be that it's your choice. You don't want to deal with all the management stuff, you want to do technical stuff. That's a legitimate decision. Some of you might have ambition to become the head of a testing organization, head of QA in a bank or something like that. So through your career, you'll progress this way. But just what I want to tell you, because I've to a large extent been here for the last few years, is it's not as rosy as you think. Because you think, yes, it's a bigger salary and I've got special parking and my title is exec of so-and-so and all those kind of things. It's quite shit to be here, okay? Unless you learn how to deal with it, because all you're doing is people. People make you tired. It's people's problems. It's your team's problem. It's raising your second-tier leadership structure. It is people fighting with you, people wanting your career. It's, I sometimes think, as a human race, we haven't really changed over the last few thousand years. We have become more technological. But if you think of ancient man, where we would be very tribal, where, that picture of the caveman dragging the woman by her hair. Luckily, we don't do that anymore. But our fundamental human nature hasn't changed. We are fundamentally selfish. We fundamentally protect our own turf. We are territorial. So in corporate, for me, all that's happened is we're dressing nicer than we did 1,000 years ago, and we maybe speak to each other a little bit better. But the fundamental human nature hasn't changed. Knife you in the back, or if you maybe have done that. So I think when you get to the part where you're dealing with people and their stuff, it's difficult to stay motivated. Because firstly, you're not doing what you liked doing anymore, which might be technical or testing or things like that. And you're dealing with human nature, your own, because we are equally imperfect. You're dealing with your team. You know, sometimes you get home and you think, I spent 12 hours today of hearing people complaining. And then you walk into your door and your partner complains to you as well. You know, then you just want to get in your car and leave. Okay, but just think of this picture. Think of where you are at the moment. To what extent is your role technical versus business or management? And where do you want to go? And as I said, it's a legitimate choice to want to stay on that side. It's just difficult to get career advancement and promotions and salary increases if you don't move down this scale. But if you choose to stay here, it is a very good choice. A lot of you in this room might have the ambition to move this way, and that's what my talk's going to cover today. So now I'm going to introduce you to Annie, my fictional little character. All right. Annie had great career progression. That's what that little arrow is showing. So let's bring this and make it relevant to QA and testing. So she started off as a junior tester, maybe did ISTQB Foundation, did some other courses, became a senior test analyst, became a test lead of an area, and so forth, and she's almost reached what she thinks is the height of her career. She's now working under the exec for testing in her bank. And her ambition is to get that job. And that's a good ambition, all right? And then one day you hear that your boss is leaving, and they're going to start recruiting again. And of course, what does Annie do? She wants to become the new head of QA. Now let's see how desperate she is. Look at that. I like that little picture. Okay, she's very ambitious because she's seen her boss being called the exec of QA, going to the top 50 leadership meetings of the bank on some island, the prestige that comes with that, as I said, the special parking lot, most likely a lot more money than she's earning now. The only challenge for Annie is she's not the only one who wants that job. Okay. There's a lot of external people applying for the job and a lot of internal people. And that's a big question, which I'll get back to a little later. Now, some of you might have experienced this. If you join a company from outside, it's good and bad. It's bad because you know very little about what you're getting yourselves involved in. Okay, you don't know all the underlying political movements and people's personalities. In the beginning, because you're the boss, everyone is super friendly with you. But it just takes time for that bad human nature to come out. But they don't really know you, and you start as the boss. It is challenging if you are promoted from the inside, and some of you may have gone through this before. You work with a team of 5 or 10 other people, you're all just equal buddies and colleagues, and you maybe go for a beer after work. Now you become their boss. The rules have changed now, and even if you're a relaxed boss and you don't micromanage and things like that, now you have to talk to them about their careers, and you have to discipline them when they're not working hard enough. And you might not promote this one and rather promote that person. So I think of the two, it's a lot more difficult to become a leader from internally than to join from externally. How many of you have become leaders of a team that you were a part of? Okay. Do you agree it's tough? It's very tough. It's easier to manage people if you don't really know them, if you're not close to them, because of course as colleagues you become friends with each other. You might actually even go for dinner with each other's partners and children over time. And it's natural and it's good. But now you have to do the tough job and make the tough decisions for that person's career and their life, because you know theoretically everyone in your team, there's a family or a loved one or children behind just that face and that line on the payroll. But now you know them. So now it's a lot more difficult. Imagine you worked in a team and you became the head of that team, and now they're downsizing and they're going through retrenchments. And they tell you, you've got 30 people in your team, we can only employ 20, so in the next month you have to get rid of 10 of them. It's easier when you don't know them well. So think of that. Okay, now you all look very depressed right now, don't worry about it. We'll have a bit more fun. Before I finish for this session, we've got about 3 minutes left. just where did I learn all the things that I'm going to tell you in the next session? The bank I worked for had about almost 3,000 testers. Okay? In the central testing area, and you can call it a TCOE or a Center of Excellence or whatever, we were about 300 people. A lot of vendors were present and permanent staff. But in the various divisions of the bank, so it could be corporate investment banking, retail banking, business banking, there were all these testing teams. And our job was to build a capability that made it attractive for all those other testing teams to want to work with us because we have superior technical skills, we're reusing assets, we're bringing costs down. And I think let me just try and translate this in my head in euro terms, I think we spent about 80 million euros on QA and testing. My job was to manage that budget and to manage the vendors, the spend, the reporting. I'm going to touch on something called cost to income or cost to serve ratios. How do you prove through metrics that you're bringing your costs down and still doing the same testing or more? So it's out of that experience, dealing with those vendors, dealing with the staff, essentially a business management role within a big testing team, that I've learned some of these lessons. I hope every one of you return after the break. If you don't, I will go for counseling, deal with my hurt feelings. But the next session of 40 minutes, I really want to get to the practicalities of this. So imagine you're like Annie, they make you head of testing. Where do you even start? Because it's not a technical conversation. What are you getting yourself involved in? That's it for now. See you in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.